Thank you very much. Check if this all works. Amazing. Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Auror, but you may also know me from Auckland's Women in Tech organisation and the very rapidly growing Slack group for women and non-binary folks in tech, which I see my co-founder over there, Shirley. I think we founded it about 10 years ago. If anyone tells you there's a pipeline problem, just come and look at the thousands of women and non-binary folks in there, and you'll find it's probably quite different. Now, thanks to COVID, it's been a couple of years since I have presented in public. This is my first in-person talk in a long time. I might be a little bit rusty, so please bear with me. I'm also really badly going to miss Zoom emoji reactions. So if you feel like responding, clicks or nods or shaking your head, no heckling, please, if you don't mind. I also have a confession to make. I have never worked at Xero. Yes. So today I want to talk a little bit about the current situation that we have with technology and why it's so hard to get right. I feel like I'll be preaching to the choir here, and I also feel like folks like Nori, for example, have set me up beautifully to talk about it in more detail. I'd like to talk about how we can and should do better, and then I'd like to show you how we approach this at Auror. And like all frameworks, this is a way that it can be approached. Your mileage may vary. So, what is our current tech situation? For a start, can you put your hands up if you've ever built a product, change, or feature that you have regretted afterwards? Okay, maybe this will be easier. Can you put your hand up if you haven't built a product, change, or feature that you haven't regretted later? Cool. Maybe we've got a couple of salespeople in the room, but that was vanishingly slim, that piece. Let me tell you first about one of my own examples of regrettable tech, because I have many. I got really passionate about ethics and tech when I was working at a software company that built software in the education industry for students. So seeing how sometimes the things that we built weren't used in the ways that we intended, or weren't used by the people we intended to use them, and what the possible consequences of that could be. So for example, our software was installed on school laptops, and one of the things that it did was allow teachers to monitor what was being done on that school laptop. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Or at least so we thought all these years ago. We didn't realize until the software was out in the wild that sometimes the context that these students were in meant that that school laptop was the only device that their families had that connected them to the internet. Students were sometimes taking these devices home, and parents and siblings were using these devices, and now the school could monitor what was being done on that device. The consequences of this are at best embarrassing. At worst, they could be really, really dangerous. So like we do in product and tech, we iterated on this and we made a few changes. So we changed it so that it only operated within school hours for a start. And then we wanted to be extra safe, so we made another change so that it would only operate within the school's IP range. We felt a lot better after that, but it really got me thinking about how we could build and test the products that we're developing better, and how we could build things that we won't regret later. I'm going to go through a few other examples of regrettable tech. Thankfully, not my own, although apologies if they do belong to any of you. So we have racially biased optic sensors. Didn't see any in this bathroom, so I couldn't test them out now. But we have things like hand dryers and bathroom taps that only work for white and light-skinned people. This kind of tech uses optic sensors to detect when a hand is underneath them. And because the teams building and testing these often don't include people of colour, it's been only tested on paler skin. So really quite frustrating, I think, for people not to be able to wash their hands. Also in times like COVID, pretty dangerous. One of our favourite tech giants, Amazon, They built a recruiting algorithm. So this was going to be used as a recruitment tool to narrow down the CVs that were coming in. You folks have all had jobs up. I think you can see how many CVs often come in for them. You can imagine at a scale like that what that would look like, so I can understand the problem that they were trying to solve. However, the system was trained on data that had been submitted by successful job applicants in tech over a 10-year period. We can see where this is going, right? Look, all of it came from men. And so the system effectively taught itself that male candidates were preferable. Apple's facing a lawsuit in the US over allegations that the blood oxygen sensor in its Apple Watch is racially biased against people with darker skin. So similar to the previous example, this one uses a pulse oximeter which detects blood oxygen levels by shining a light through the wearer's skin, and sensors detect the reflected colors to estimate the percentage of oxygen in the user's blood. This is significantly less accurate when used by people with a darker skin tone. And here we're starting to get into the realm of health devices. Again, pretty dangerous. Might just leave that one up there for a minute. So in this case, an Asian MIT student asked an AI image tool generator to generate a professional headshot for her LinkedIn profile. It promptly made her white. This is, yeah, not ideal. A recent study by researchers found that AI image generators had an issue with gender and racial bias, and that 97% of the images produced when you ask for images of, for example, a director or a CEO are of white men. This is, again, because the AI tool has been trained on biased data that amplifies stereotypes. You may have noticed I have an accent. Undercover South African on the stage here. Bye, donkey. Speech recognition systems can only recognize accents they've been trained to understand. And across the board, the standard data used to train these systems are of predominantly white, highly educated Americans. To learn how to interpret the accent of someone from Trinidad, Eswatini, or the UAE, a system needs voice data along with an accurate transcription of that data, which inevitably has to be done by a human being. It's incredibly painstaking and expensive to demonstrate to a machine what a particular word sounds like when it's spoken by someone from a particular community. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but it is particularly onerous. Now, I've been caught out by this one a few times. I'm probably giving away my age here, but way back before Uber, taxis in New Zealand, you used to phone and there was a system which determined where you wanted to go. Embarrassingly, as a junior person in that agency, I had to ask other people to call me taxis every time. And still today, Google's meeting transcription utterly mangles everything I have to say. We spent about 2 hours fixing the transcription of a meeting I was in, and it was a half-hour meeting. So let me know if you've got better options available for folks with accents. And the National Cervical Screening Program checks reduce the risk of developing cervical cancer. So this is available to anyone with a cervix, aged between 25 and 69. However, trans men and non-binary people are missing these screenings because some health software systems are not set up to notify them. And I know we've got a bunch of health folks in the room at the moment. This is a massive issue of health equity that means that an already vulnerable group of people could be subject to poorer health outcomes. This was another tough one. A study published online in an internal medicine journal tested responses to questions from 68 phones and 7 manufacturers. They focused on 4 widely used smartphone-based conversational agents. So they looked at Siri for Apple, they looked at Google Now, S-Voice for Samsung, and Microsoft's Cortana. And they found that responses to questions about mental health and physical violence were often inconsistent and unhelpful. Now, the teams building these voice agents hadn't considered the kinds of things they'd be asked to help with, more than just setting a cooking timer or asking what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. And this is a really, really hard problem to solve. I do not envy them having to do this. And then let's talk about facial recognition. So, excuse me. I was way excited about that water. A 2019 study by the US National Institute of Standards and Technology of almost 200 facial recognition algorithms found that for one-to-one matching, there were higher rates of false positives for Asian and African American faces relative to images of Caucasians. The differentials, though, they ranged from a factor of 10 to 100 times, depending on the individual algorithm. Now, we've all seen this in the media, and this was 2019. I think the amount of coverage that this got meant that these systems have progressed quite far, but we need to be very, very, very careful when we're looking into using things like this. So why is this so hard to get right? It is incredibly hard to meaningfully regulate the tech industry. Look at the last year alone and the advances in tech. Everything is moving unbelievably fast. And laws develop really, really slowly. It's also incredibly hard to apply them well when tech is ubiquitous. How do you decide whose laws apply? You know, is this about where's the tech domiciled? Is it where the company is? Is it where the servers are? Is it where the users are? And honestly, as a tech industry, we haven't really been that helpful about it as well. In the late 90s, I worked for a company that deliberately placed its servers on the Isle of Man, both for tax purposes and for legal purposes. And we've seen other companies doing things like this. That wasn't unusual. And then bias is built into how we think. So the teams developing and testing new technologies are often homogeneous. They all look the same. And they build for what they know. So any bias that they have then gets built into the software and the systems that we use. Think about the Amazon recruiting example, for example, which was built on people having reviewed those CVs for 10 years. Can we get a scroll on the tech? Thanks. Thank you. And then the data that we're training systems on is also incredibly important. So the data that we train systems on also comes with biases inbuilt. And this further propagates bias at scale through code. We have ways of really, really damaging things. So for example, if a particular facial recognition system was built in Japan and trained on Japanese faces, how well is it going to work here with our Pacifica communities? It's not going to work very well. So we really need to challenge whether we're thinking about the right things and whether we're thinking about them at the times that they matter. I think we hear a lot about shifting left in product. This is another one that we need to shift left. So how can we build products that don't harm people? How do we leave things better than we found them? I'm going to show you how we approach this at Auror, but I don't know how many of you are very aware of what we do at Auror. So I'm going to give you a very quick run through about what we do and why this is important to us. So Auror is a faster way for organizations, currently retailers, to report crime in structured ways. That enables them to connect the dots on crime that's happening and help police focus on solving organized retail crime rather than petty theft. And it also helps our customers keep their teams and customers safe in the face of rising levels of aggression. In Australia alone, there are around 424 violent or abusive incidents reported per day in retail stores. It's not just because they're Australian. But I didn't look at the stats for New Zealand. The US Chamber of Commerce estimates $150 billion lost to theft in the US per year, and 4 years ago, that was the number globally. So that's the acceleration that we've seen. And we know that it's 4 times more likely that a repeat offender will be aggressive and cause a safety event. We also know from the data that we see that 10% of the people committing theft in retail stores account for 62% of the overall loss, and that this figure climbs significantly when looked at for specific targeted organizations. Let's look at fuel retail just to get a little bit more specific. Globally, there's been an increase of 150 to 200% in fuel losses, and this is without applying tech to the problem. This is people taking fuel and not paying for it. Okay, so you're a petrol station attendant. It's nighttime. You're on your own. You've got 3 seconds to choose who's going to steal fuel. So we've been talking about the bias that can happen with technology. In this case, fuel station attendants were relying on their own perceptions of people to decide whether to put someone on prepay or not. All these faces aren't real, by the way. These are AI generated. And just while we're talking about bias, image of the African lady, 4 along at the top, has bias seeped into it. It's the only one with a grass background. Really interesting just to kind of see this stuff as we use them. Can you imagine some of the interactions between customers and staff? Whoever you choose will likely be wrong, and making the call based on your own intuition leads to conflict. You might have regrets. Now, technology itself isn't bad, usually, but the way it's built, trained, and applied can be problematic. And it's on us as makers and evolvers of the technology to ensure that the way it's applied is responsible and ethical. When done well, we can use technology in ways that actually removes bias. For example, instead of relying on people to make judgment calls based on who looks dodgy or whose car looks dodgy, we can use data about which vehicles have previously been associated with fuel drive-offs and only lock the pumps for those. Now, new technology and artificial intelligence is emerging as a game changer across industries. Technology has the ability to revolutionize the way we work, interact, and live. However, as AI becomes increasingly integrated into products, the need for responsible AI practices has never been more critical. It really needs to be front of mind, not an afterthought. But when we were developing our own understanding of this area, we really struggled to find many resources that were practical. There was plenty of theory, and there was a lot of large government agency documents. And I'd like to actually call out 2, so notable ones from the NHS in the UK and the Canadian government, which were pretty good, but still very, very, very lengthy. And we thought, how do you put this into practice at a smaller company? So we realized we needed something that was simple. It needed to quickly identify issues and risks, but it still needed to enable fast innovation because we're in business, yeah? We knew it needed to be collaborative, as well as short, sharp, and to the point, so that anyone could pick it up and start using it, no matter what industry. So today I'm going to show you how we approach responsible tech and AI at Auror. But the first thing we did was started by agreeing a set of principles to make sure that we got the outcomes that we aimed for. So for example, principles of equality and fairness, so that AI systems do not unjustly harm, exclude, disempower, or discriminate against individuals or particular groups. That we meet all applicable laws in all of the regions in which we operate. Side-eye to Meta on that one. That we're transparent about all of our AI activities, including how and when AI is used in the Auror platform, and the operation and outputs of our AI systems have to be transparent, auditable, and generally explainable. And we also need to make sure that any tech and AI that we use promotes and supports the well-being and safety of our customers, our partners, and the communities in which we operate. So how do we do this? First, we start with a threshold risk assessment. Are we using new technology, or are we using existing technology in a new way? Is there anything about what we're doing that could come with risk? If so, we move to a lean canvas workshop, and I'll show you what that looks like next. And then from there, the project manager or product manager takes the lean canvas and completes an impact assessment. If the risks raised by the impact assessment are significant, we may move to a full privacy impact assessment completed by third parties. And then we take that impact assessment with all of the risks and mitigations to our responsible tech and AI review board for a go, no-go decision. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at these. So I'm pretty sure most of you here will have experience using a lean canvas. So this might look quite familiar. If you aren't familiar, it's used by a group of people that work together and use post-it notes to co-create or brainstorm around a problem space. And so the responsible tech canvas is inspired by traditional lean canvas, and it takes a collaborative approach to working through the technology benefits and risks with a diverse group of stakeholders, and that is really critical. So we collaborate on what's the problem we're trying to solve, who will use it, who's going to be impacted by it, and how would it be used. And this could have saved me some pain quite a long time ago. When it comes to the solutions we're considering, how will they solve the problem and what technology options do we have? What's the value proposition? How will it help our users, our partners, and the community? How do we plan to commercialize it? I noticed someone earlier talking about commercialization way earlier in the piece. What are the positive impacts that we're aiming for our business, for our users, for our partners or the community? And then what negative impacts, harms, or risks might we encounter? What vulnerable communities may be impacted directly or indirectly? And what mitigations could we take to remove or reduce any of those negative impacts, harms, or risks? So the product manager, once the group has worked on this, takes it away. And just talking about iteration. So our first iteration of this, we had no lean canvas. We looked at what was done in places like the NHS and the Canadian government. And we had a lengthy impact assessment document. I think the template alone was 36 pages long. And it was drafted to ensure we were covering all of the necessary points that a product manager was expected to complete. And my deepest apologies to Sarah, who is somewhere over there in the audience, who experienced this pain firsthand for us. So what we're looking at today has come through many iterations, a lot like our software. Also note the diversity in that room. So where we've landed is the Lean Canvas workshop followed by a cut-down impact assessment with a supporting user guide to inform and assist the team completing the document. An impact assessment is an accountability tool to help assess the possible societal impacts of technologies and AI systems before implementation. It's designed to help identify, assess, and consider how to mitigate any potential negative or unintended consequences of technologies, AI, or other algorithmic systems before deployment. It contains a series of questions to help you provide high-level information about your project, consider the possible consequences of your project, including any ethical and legal issues, potential harms or consequences, and consider how these can be addressed. Now, I'm running very short on time, and I would like to go much deeper into this, but I'm going to do a light look. A significant amount of the questions in the impact assessment are about data. So data powers so many technologies and AI systems, and so we really need to understand what training and production data we'll be using and how accurate and reliable it is. Other important things to note is that this should be completed in the discovery phase or at the latest at the beginning of a design phase of a project. It needs to be completed by the product manager or another lead with input from a diverse multidisciplinary team. And you really need to keep the answers succinct and clear using plain language. Once we've completed that impact assessment, it's time to take it to our review board. Now, decide who's best placed in your organization to be on this kind of board. Ours includes subject matter experts from across the business in privacy, security, legal, and tech. So what were the key things that we learned during this iteration process? My team tells me I talk very fast on this one, and it's because I'm a little mad about it. Because it's 2023. And we've been talking about this for a long time. It just doesn't seem to get any better. But I'll say it again. It's not enough just to have a framework or a process. It's really important to have a shared understanding that inclusive product development requires diverse perspectives at the table. We've already seen how a homogenous group can inadvertently perpetuate biases and overlook potential risks. By embracing a range of viewpoints, cultural backgrounds, and experiences, your company can create products that are fair, unbiased, and cater to the needs of a global population. and collaboration between interdisciplinary teams can lead to more comprehensive risk assessments, better mitigations, and overall a far better product. And ethical considerations are non-negotiable. We need to continuously assess the potential societal, economic, and cultural impacts of AI systems and ensure automation bias doesn't occur. Inherent biases can creep into technology, and we need to take proactive measures to mitigate them. And much like a lot of the product work we do, responsible tech and AI is not a one-time checkbox. This is a continuous journey. We need to be committed to staying informed about the latest regulatory changes, best practices, and actual use of our products in the wild. Now, I've sped through a lot of this because we are making it available widely. Building a product and a company that is used by many or has an impact on many requires responsible stewardship, where technological progress goes hand in hand with ethical considerations. So as we move forward, embracing ethical principles, diversity, and ongoing learning will be pivotal in harnessing the full potential of AI while safeguarding against its potential pitfalls. The journey towards responsible tech is a collective effort, and I'd really love to see you folks join this and work on it together. So in the next few weeks, we're going to be open sourcing our approach to responsible tech and AI, by which we hope to shape the tech landscape for the better. But you're getting early access to this. There's a QR code on there and also a link if you want it. If you scan that, you'll get the lean canvas, you'll get the impact assessment template and the accompanying guide to use in your own companies. But importantly, we still want to work on this iteratively. So I would love to hear from you folks. If you try this with your teams, what worked, what didn't work, what can be improved, how do we work on this together to make our entire tech landscape better for everyone? We're not the only people working in this space. There are so many people doing amazing work here, and there is so much reading that can help us. These are some of my favorite resources. So you can look into the Foundations of Humane Technology course. Ethical OS has an incredible risk mitigations checklist that we find works beautifully alongside the lean canvas. It really gives your teams ideas of what kinds of things to consider as they're completing it. And then if I have to recommend only one book, I'm not sure how many of you have read it already. I'm so proud that this is a New Zealand book, right? Shouting Zeros and Ones, Digital Technology, Ethics and Policy in New Zealand is outstanding. I believe there's a follow-on now as well. I learned so much from that single book, not only about New Zealand specific things, but just the wider global population. We are worlds ahead when it comes to that particular aspect. Thank you.